Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Graham. While I was planning to leave my wife, I found out something that changed everything. I'd been married to Layla for 6 years when I decided to file for divorce after watching her meet another man and disappear into his house. But 2 weeks into the legal process, she collapsed in our front yard. I discovered that her cancer had returned aggressively, and she had only months to live. 6 years that had started with genuine love and optimism, but had been battered by infertility struggles, cancer, financial devastation, and emotional distance, until we'd become strangers living parallel lives in the same house. We met when I was 29 and she was 28, both living in Sacramento and working professional jobs. I was co-owner of an auto dealership with my childhood best friend. We'd started the business 3 years earlier, and it had potential, but required constant attention and long hours. Layla worked as a dental office manager, organized and efficient, with ambitions to eventually open her own practice. We'd met at a mutual friend's engagement party. We had clicked immediately over shared interests and values. Started dating seriously within weeks. The relationship progressed naturally through normal stages: exclusivity, meeting families, and discussing futures. After dating Layla for about 18 months, I decided it was time to take the next step. I planned a thoughtful proposal at a quiet restaurant that overlooked the same river where we had shared our very first date. I remember my hands shaking a little as I opened the ring box. Layla said yes right away, with the biggest smile I had ever seen on her face. We were both genuinely excited about our future and the life we believed we would build together. About 8 months later, we got married. It was a beautiful wedding with around 100 guests. Everyone said the ceremony felt warm and joyful. We traveled to Hawaii for our honeymoon and spent 2 weeks exploring beaches, trying new foods, and just enjoying being newlyweds. When we returned home, we settled into married life in a comfortable 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, a place we had bought together and were proud of. The first year of marriage went well. We had the usual minor disagreements that every couple faces. But none of those arguments ever felt serious. They were just the typical parts of learning to live together. Meanwhile, I was working long hours at the dealership. My business partner and I were focused on growing the company, expanding our car inventory, reaching more customers, and improving our reputation. It was exhausting work, but exciting too. There was something deeply satisfying about building a business from scratch and seeing real progress step by step. Layla had always wanted to start a family as soon as possible. Even before we got married, she talked about having children within the first year or two. Becoming a mother was her dream, something she looked forward to with her whole heart. I wanted children too, but I wanted us to be more financially stable first. I wanted the car dealership to be running smoothly and turning a steady profit before we added the huge responsibility and cost of raising a child. Still, I promised her we wouldn't wait too long. I knew how vital motherhood was to her, and I didn't want to take that hope away. By our 2nd year of marriage, we finally decided it was time. We stopped using contraception and expected things to happen naturally and quickly, like it always seemed to happen for everyone else we knew. But it didn't. Month after month, we were met with negative pregnancy tests. What started as excitement slowly became disappointment. Sex changed from something intimate and passionate into something planned and mechanical. Everything revolved around ovulation dates, fertility windows, and strict schedules. There was no spontaneity anymore, only pressure. Layla grew more anxious with each passing month. She tracked every detail of her body. Her temperature every morning, every small change, every sign she thought meant something. And every time her period came, she cried. It broke her a little more each time. I felt the pressure too, though in a different way. The closeness we once had began to fade. Our bedroom felt like a doctor's office instead of a place of love. We started arguing more often. Layla would say I was working too much, that my stress or exhaustion might be hurting our chances. I'd tell her that her obsession with getting pregnant was making things worse, not better. Even with all the tension and frustration, I still believed we would get through it. I kept telling myself this was just a difficult season in our marriage, something we would be together. I imagined the day we would finally conceive and look back at this struggle as just another challenge we overcame as a team. By our third year of trying, we finally went to get medical help. We both did all the tests. My results weren't perfect. The doctor said my sperm motility was lower than ideal, though not low enough to make pregnancy impossible. Layla's test showed that her ovarian reserve was a bit lower than expected for her age, but nothing severe. The fertility doctor recommended IVF. He explained that, with our results and the time we had already spent trying naturally, IVF would give us the best chance of having a baby. IVF was expensive. It was physically demanding on Layla and emotionally heavy on both of us. She had to take injections every single day. We had constant doctor visits, blood work, ultrasound monitoring, egg retrieval, and embryo transfer. The whole process took over our lives. I was already stressed from work, and trying to balance my schedule with all the fertility appointments drained me even more. My business partner understood when I needed to step out or come in late, but the dealership still needed me there, and I felt like I was failing in both places, at work and at home. Our first IVF cycle worked. Layla got pregnant. We were careful with our hopes, but still, we allowed ourselves to feel happy. We reached 8 weeks. We told a few close family members. Then, Layla miscarried. The loss crushed us. It felt like something inside both of us broke. After that, we stopped talking the way we used to. We lived in the same house, shared the same rooms, but barely had real conversations anymore. We both quietly carried the feeling of being failures, even though neither of us said it out loud. The pain was too deep and too fresh to face directly. After months of living in this emotional limbo, we finally decided to try IVF again. One failed attempt couldn't be the end for us. We agreed we had to try at least one more time, give ourselves one more chance at the family we wanted so badly. But before we could even begin the next cycle, everything changed. One morning, while Layla was showering, she felt a small lump in her breast. It wasn't big, but it was definitely there, and definitely new. That evening, she told me about it. She tried to sound relaxed, even joked about it at first, but I could hear the fear hiding under her voice. It was a kind of fear you can't cover up, no matter how brave you pretend to be. I tried to calm her down. I told her it was probably nothing, that lots of women found harmless lumps. I said we shouldn't panic until there was an actual reason to. But inside, I was terrified. My mother died of breast cancer when I was in my early 20s. I knew exactly what that disease could do to a person, to a family. The thought of going through anything like that again made my stomach twist. Layla made an appointment with her doctor the next day. First, they did a mammogram, then an ultrasound. The doctors didn't like what they saw, so they ordered a biopsy. A few days later, the results came in. Positive. Breast cancer. Stage 2. The aggressive type, the kind that doesn't give you time to breathe or think. It needed treatment immediately. From there, everything moved fast. They put together a strict treatment plan. Chemotherapy to shrink the tumor, surgery to remove the breast, then radiation afterward. Maybe more chemo, depending on how her body responds. Layla went through all of it. I became her caretaker overnight. I drove her to every single appointment. There were so many I stopped trying to count. I managed all her medications, cooked meals she could eat even when chemo killed her appetite, cleaned the house, handled the bills, and handled everything she didn't have the strength to handle. I barely slept. I was working long hours at the dealership to cover medical expenses that the insurance didn't cover. I'd come home exhausted, only to keep going because she needed me even more than I needed rest. The treatments changed her emotionally. She became fragile in ways I had never seen before. She cried easily, sometimes over small things, sometimes over nothing she could explain. At times, she snapped at me without meaning to. She was fighting her own body, terrified of dying, angry about losing her breast, and confused about how she saw herself. The pain, the drugs, the fear, they all took a toll. I tried to be patient. I tried to be understanding, but deep down, I began to feel invisible. I was pushing myself harder than I ever had, physically, emotionally, financially. Yet I felt like none of it was being seen or appreciated. Medical bills slowly ate up our savings. The insurance helped, but not enough. There were still heavy out-of-pocket costs, deductibles, co-pays, expensive prescriptions, and long trips to specialists in other towns. Every month felt like we were falling deeper into a hole. To keep us afloat, I pushed myself harder at work. I picked up extra duties at the dealership, took on tasks no one else wanted, and stayed long after closing. I worked evenings, weekends, whenever I could. I was exhausted, but I kept going because we needed the money. Layla started saying I was never home anymore. She said I had become distant. She felt like she was going through cancer treatment by herself because I was always at work instead of by her side. I argued back each time, telling her I was breaking my own body to pay for everything. I reminded her that medical bills don't disappear on their own. I told her I was doing all of this for us, for her treatment, for our future. The arguments went nowhere. Round and round, the same points, the same frustration. We were both drained, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Neither of us had the strength to listen truly. During this period, we stopped touching each other. There was no intimacy. Her body was weak and recovering from surgeries and treatments. But even simple affection faded away. No holding hands. No hugs. No brief kisses. No comforting touches. Nothing. We still shared the same bed, but we slept facing opposite directions, staring at different walls. We were inches apart, but living in two separate worlds. By the 5th year of our marriage, Layla finally finished her treatments. She completed all the chemotherapy and radiation her doctors recommended. She was declared in remission. Her body was slowly healing. I expected her to come back to herself eventually, to regain her energy, to laugh again, to reconnect with me, to rebuild what we had before cancer entered our lives. But that didn't happen. She changed in a way I didn't fully understand. She grew quieter, more withdrawn. She didn't return to work. She said she wasn't ready. She said she needed time to process everything she had been through. After facing death, she said managing a dental office felt pointless. She didn't know what she wanted anymore. I didn't push her. I believed she deserved the time to heal. I told myself I could handle the bills on my own until she felt strong enough to contribute again. As she regained her physical strength, Layla began going out more. She met friends for brunch, attended cancer survivor support groups, and went to girls' nights that sometimes lasted late into the night. I thought it was good for her. I believed she was building a social circle that understood her new reality. I wanted her to feel alive again, to feel supported in ways I couldn't provide. I didn't question any of it because I didn't want more arguments. I didn't want to look controlling or uncaring. Honestly, I was just relieved she seemed happier than she had been during treatment. As the months went by, I slowly realized that Layla and I were no longer living like husband and wife. We had become something closer to roommates who happened to share the same address. We barely talked unless it was about schedules, bills, or something that needed to be done around the house. Most evenings, we didn't even eat together. I would come home from work and find that she had already eaten hours earlier, or she wouldn't be home at all, and I'd end up eating alone. Another thing I noticed was how protective she suddenly became of her phone. She took it everywhere, even to the bathroom. And when the phone rang, she'd quietly step into another room to answer. At the time, I didn't think much of it. After everything she had gone through, I thought she simply wanted at least one part of her life to stay personal. I didn't imagine it meant anything serious. I assumed that our marriage had simply moved into a mature phase. Stable and functional enough. Cheating never crossed my mind. I refused even to consider it. Layla had just survived cancer. She was still healing in so many ways. It didn't seem possible that she would have the energy or the emotional space to be involved with someone else. Then one afternoon, my business partner and friend brought up something that changed everything. We were walking through the dealership, checking inventory, when he said casually, "I saw Layla last weekend." She wasn't alone. She was with a guy. They looked close. I laughed it off right away. I told him she'd probably been with someone from her support group. She had mentioned making friends there. My friend gave a slight nod, but his face said he didn't fully believe what I'd said. His voice softened as he replied, "Yeah, maybe." But his tone made it clear he thought it was more than that. That was the moment the first seed of doubt settled in my mind. Even after a while, the unease didn't go away. In fact, it grew. And suddenly, I began noticing little things I had ignored before. About 2 weeks after my friend made that comment, Layla told me one evening that I was home early, that she was going to meet a friend from her cancer support group. She said the woman was having a hard time and needed someone to talk to. But something inside me tightened. I suddenly felt that if I didn't find the truth now, I would keep living in doubt and suspicion forever. So when she left the house, I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed her. I stayed several cars behind so she wouldn't notice me. Layla drove to a neighborhood I'd never been to before. It was quiet and well kept. She parked in front of a nice single-family house, turned off her engine, and stepped out of her car. After she knocked, a man came out of the house, not a woman in need of help as she claimed. He walked up to her with a smile that looked far too familiar. And then they hugged, long, tight, and warm. A hug you give to someone you're deeply connected to. Layla looked up at him with a softness I hadn't seen in a long time. They went inside together. The door closed behind them like a final answer to every fear I'd been trying to ignore. I sat in my car down the street, staring at that house, feeling my whole world collapse inside me. It was no longer a suspicion. My wife was having an affair. She had been lying to me about where she was going, who she was meeting, and what she was doing. Suddenly, every late night, every girls' night out, every support group meeting felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't dared to complete. How long had this been happening? How many times had she walked out the door and into someone else's arms? I didn't go to the door. I didn't call her or confront her. I just drove away slowly, feeling numb, empty, and devastated. I got home before she did, sat alone in the dark living room, trying to understand how the woman I had cared for through cancer could do this. I had been there through her pain, her fear, her treatments. I had been the one holding her when she cried, and she repaid that devotion by giving her heart to someone else. Hours later, when Layla finally came home, I was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I listened quietly as she moved around the room, brushing her teeth, removing her jewelry, slipping under the blanket. I lay there completely still. Over the next few days, I started watching Layla with new eyes. It was like a veil had been lifted, and suddenly I could see signs of the affair everywhere. And as I watched her, a painful truth grew inside me. I no longer recognized the woman I had married. The Layla I loved either disappeared during the cancer treatments, or maybe she was never real in the first place. Perhaps I had fallen in love with a version of her that only existed in my mind. What I was living with now felt like a stranger, someone who used our marriage as a cover while she built a different life with someone else. One evening, after another round of cold silence at home, I finally contacted a divorce attorney. I told him everything: 6 years of marriage, no children, the infertility struggles, the miscarriage, the cancer battle, and now my suspicion that she was cheating. I explained that our finances were mostly separate now, which made things easier. The attorney went over California divorce laws with me. He explained community property, how assets would be divided, and how infidelity wouldn't change the financial outcome. It won't change the legal process, he said gently, but it does change your emotional position. I told him I didn't care about money. I didn't want revenge or some big payout. I just wanted out. I wanted my freedom back. I wanted to escape this marriage that had become a heavy cage filled with bitterness and betrayal. The truth was painful but clear. I had carried this marriage for too long, and she repaid that loyalty by finding comfort in someone else's arms. By lying to my face every day. By treating our marriage like something disposable, while I treated it like something sacred. For the first time in years, I finally admitted the truth to myself. I deserved peace. I deserved honesty. I deserved a real partner, not someone who took everything from me and gave nothing back. The attorney was to file the divorce papers, and we were about 2 weeks into the legal process when everything suddenly fell apart in the worst possible way. I was at the dealership one quiet afternoon when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but it had our local area code. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. A woman's voice, someone I didn't know, came through the line. "Is this Graham? Your wife collapsed while watering the lawn. A neighbor found her. She's been taken to the emergency room." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My whole body froze. Then instinct kicked in. I asked which hospital she was taken to, thanked the woman without even knowing what I said, and told my business partner I had to leave immediately. I drove faster than I should have, barely noticing the traffic lights or the scenery. When I reached the emergency department, I found Layla on a hospital bed. She was awake, but she looked terrible, pale, exhausted, almost fragile. She had 4 lines in her arms and monitors beeping around her. It didn't look like the woman I knew at all. A doctor came to talk to me and asked if we could step into a private consultation room. He explained that after Layla collapsed, they ran several tests. The CT scan showed multiple masses on her liver and lungs. They contacted her oncologist, who quickly sent over her medical records. The cancer had come back. And not just in one place, it had spread everywhere. Her liver, her lungs, her bones. Stage 4. Aggressive and advanced. It felt like someone punched me straight in the stomach. I could barely form a sentence. I kept asking how this could even happen. She had been in remission. She had finished all her treatment. We thought the nightmare was over. The doctor said breast cancer can return quietly, that it sometimes comes back stronger. He explained that Layla had been missing follow-up appointments for months. She had also been hiding symptoms, pain, constant tiredness, and shortness of breath. She hadn't told anyone. I asked why she wouldn't come to me, why she'd keep something so serious a secret. The doctor said many patients stay silent out of fear or denial. Telling someone means admitting the cancer is back, and some people simply can't face that reality right away. Then I asked about her prognosis. The doctor's face said it before the words did. With the cancer spread this far, Layla likely had only months left. Maybe 3 to 6 if treatment helped. Maybe less if it didn't. I felt crushing guilt, even though the rational part of my brain knew her choices weren't my fault. I felt this complicated mixture of anger, sorrow, and devastation. I sat in that consultation room trying to process impossible information. Had the affair started before or after she discovered the recurrence? Did she cheat because she thought she was dying anyway? Was this her way of feeling alive one more time? Or had she been unfaithful regardless, and the cancer was a separate tragedy? I would never have answers to these questions. I could ask her, but would I trust anything she said at this point? When I went back to Layla's room, she was awake. She looked at me with fear, shame, and resignation. She knew I knew. I could see it in my expression. She whispered that she was sorry. For everything. For not telling me. For the choices she'd made. For the pain she'd caused. I couldn't respond. I stood there looking at my dying wife, who'd betrayed me and hidden her terminal diagnosis. Over the next few days, I had to make impossible decisions. Layla was discharged from the hospital with referrals to palliative care and hospice services. I would need intensive support as her condition declined. I called my divorce attorney and told him to halt everything relating to the divorce immediately. He asked if I was sure, adding that Layla's diagnosis didn't legally obligate me to stay, that I could still proceed with the divorce if that's what I wanted. I said I was sure. I couldn't morally abandon Layla now. I couldn't let her die alone, going through this. I couldn't be the person who divorced his wife while she was dying of cancer. I was not doing it out of love. I wasn't sure I loved her anymore after discovering the affair. I was doing it out of human decency, out of respect for what we'd once had before everything fell apart. I wanted to give dignity to the end of what had been beautiful at the beginning. I slipped back into full caretaker mode, the exact role I had taken on during her first battle with cancer. Only this time, I knew there would be no recovery. I was caring for her in her final months of life. I managed everything. Her medications were adjusted, making sure her pain was controlled as the cancer worsened. Hospital visits for palliative treatments. Cleaning the house, doing laundry, and keeping the environment calm and safe. Eventually, I had to help her bathe when she became too weak to do it herself, feed her when swallowing grew difficult, and coordinate with hospice nurses to make sure everything ran smoothly. I watched her body deteriorate day by day, each change more painful to witness than the last. Layla's condition declined faster than I could have imagined. The cancer was aggressive, and previous treatments had already weakened her body. Within weeks, she went from walking on her own to needing help for every step, until she became completely bedbound. She lost a shocking amount of weight. The vibrant, lively woman I had married became skeletal, her once warm skin taking on a grayish pallor. Her breathing grew shallow and strained, each inhale a labor. I slept in a chair beside our bed, listening for the faintest sound of discomfort, ready to help her at any moment. I would wake multiple times in the night to help her to the bathroom, adjust her position, or administer pain medication. She rarely spoke toward the end. There wasn't enough energy for words. She would simply look at me, her eyes full of both gratitude and apology, as if trying to say everything without speaking. I never had the conversation about the affair. I never asked when or why it had happened or who it was. It felt meaningless. She was dying. Nothing mattered anymore except her comfort and dignity. The man she had been seeing never appeared. I don't know if he knew she was dying. I don't know whether she had told him or just disappeared from his life. I didn't care enough to ask. About 18 weeks after her collapse in the yard, Layla died. It was early morning. I was sitting beside her, as I had been for weeks, watching her breathe. That morning, her breath sounded different, shallow, uneven, fragile. And then, suddenly, they stopped. Her chest no longer rose and fell. I stayed there for a long time, holding her hand, feeling a storm of emotions I couldn't untangle. Grief, raw and complicated, washed over me. I mourned the woman I had loved so deeply. I mourned the marriage we had lost long before this moment. I mourned the future we would never have, the life we had imagined together and never built. And yet, there was a strange relief, too. Relief that her suffering had ended, that the relentless weight of caregiving was finally lifted from my shoulders, that I could breathe and start processing everything that had happened. I called hospice to report her death. They sent a nurse to pronounce her gone officially. Then I made arrangements for the funeral home to collect her body. That afternoon, I sat in our house feeling untethered, like a ship without an anchor. 6 years of marriage, 6 months of watching her fade, and now she was gone. Alone, surrounded by memories and the ghost of what had been. Looking back, months after Layla's death, I understand some things more clearly, though many questions remain unanswered. I learned that marriage can die long before divorce papers are signed or death certificates issued. Layla and I had stopped being real partners years before her illness or her affair. We had become two damaged people living side by side, coexisting, but no longer connecting. I learned that caregiving does not guarantee faithfulness or honesty. My devotion during Layla's first battle with cancer had not prevented her from seeking intimacy elsewhere. People are capable of both receiving love and care, and of betraying those who give it. I learned that a terminal diagnosis complicates morality. Betrayal is still betrayal, but the context makes the response less clear-cut. Had Layla been healthy, discovering her affair would have led to divorce without hesitation. Her illness made leaving impossible, at least ethically, and that choice shaped the final months of my life. I learned that staying through someone's death out of obligation, rather than love, is uniquely painful. I had done the right thing by not abandoning her, but caring for someone I no longer trusted, someone I felt disconnected from, while she died, was emotionally brutal. Most of all, I learned that doing everything right does not guarantee a fair outcome. I had tried to be a good husband through infertility, cancer, and financial struggles. I had tried to love, protect, and provide. But Layla had her own choices, her own needs, her own secrets, And sometimes life collapses regardless of your intentions. Some people call me a saint for staying with her through the end. They say they could never have done what I did, that I showed extraordinary character by caring for her despite the betrayal. Others call me a fool, arguing that I should have divorced her and let her face the consequences of her actions. I don't know which view is correct. What I do know is that leaving her while she was dying felt impossible. Abandoning her would have made me feel like a monster for the rest of my life. But staying came at a tremendous cost. I am left with grief tangled in anger, sadness, guilt, and a complicated relief. Therapy is helping slowly, but the emotions are still messy and heavy. I mourn the marriage that died long ago, the betrayal I couldn't prevent, and the woman I loved, now gone. I don't know if I will ever have answers about the affair, why it happened, when it began, whether her terminal recurrence pushed her toward it. Layla took those answers with her. I am left to live with ambiguity, trying to make peace with questions that may never be answered. Thank you for watching.